Nick John from Glovebox Live interviews Jamie Cameron and Luke Hayden from The Last Dinosaur before their headline gig at the Jericho Tavern in Oxford.
I realised skin and bone are merely craft of stick and stone to give the heart a place to grow. Wrap me in foil, plant me in soil, and though I may spoil, my heart will never grow.
We're backstage at the Jericho Tavern in Oxford, and we're looking forward to a gig, The Last Dinosaur, and I'm here with Jamie and Luke. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Just finished your sound check,
Yeah.
so looking forward to the gig tonight.
Yeah, now I am, definitely. That was a really great sound check. It's always nice. I tend to get nervous, but because of how well that sounded, really friendly sound guy, feeling pretty good now. How about you?
It was an emotional soundtrack for George. But we got through it.
That's a good point, actually. There was a little bit there where it looked like the electric guitar just wasn't working at all, but just a little bit of a wiggle with a particular...
Screwdriver. And
Yeah, with a screwdriver.
twiddled the knobs and it worked.
Great. You mentioned the word emotional. Now, I've listened to some of your tracks and things like that. It's quite an intense vibe
Yeah.
about what the band does, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Yes.
how did you fall into that kind of music, and have you been together the whole time? I mean, you were formed before your first album came out in 2010, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess that sound arrives when someone just locks themselves in their bedroom, writes songs about feelings and is too scared to show people, and then when eventually they build up the courage to show people, that's that's what happens. Yeah, just a kind of a diary put to music almost. Yeah.
So did you write separately, or did you write the songs first and then form the band?
We would write stuff together, but when it came to the actual lyrics, I wrote prior to us writing together, and that's how I developed that sort of way of writing music. And then when we started writing together, it would open up into Luke perhaps starting songs, and then we'd record them, and then I'd layer stuff onto them. But generally, like the lyric side of things, I would add sort of alone. So yeah.
There's a very sort of cinematic approach
I like that.
to your songwriting. Is that something that you deliberately set out to? Because I mean, obviously, one guy on a guitar, you can go down the singer-songwriter route or anything, but
Yeah.
was that cinematic feel something that you planned from the word go?
Generally, we're not very good at planning anything, so which has its pros and cons, but that would be one of the reasons why perhaps we arrived there, because we just spend a lot of time with one piano part and then add another thing.
Yeah.
None of us really know how to play any instruments, really. You never even
know a
learned,
little bit, but not great though.
Yeah, exactly. So therefore, what that is, it's just a lot of experimentation, and also working with people like Rachel, who are far more talented and trained than
But we're
we
getting
are.
better.
You did a cover of Runai, Talk track, because
I saw this guy.
that was a band that immediately, when I heard your first stuff, that I immediately thought of.
Well, that means a lot to me because they're my favourite band in the whole wide world. See that connection just because they mean a lot to me. But you saying that, I mean, that's almost beyond music to me. That's like it's almost like it's written like by nature or
breathe
something.
in.
Yeah.
When there's something,
It's
that every album just makes you inhale, exhale.
yeah, exactly. How can anyone write that? It simultaneously sounds like it's existed forever, and also that it was recorded now. You know, but outside, and even the stuff like, well, even Colour of Spring, which like straddled. I'm going to keep saying like, and it will really bother me, but even the Colour of Spring that straddles 80s sort of production and stuff like that, but is their transition album into what came afterwards, like Spirit of Eden. It doesn't suffer from the 80s production.
Yeah.
If anything, it's almost, well, not more, but it's just as exciting that it has both, what came later and the 80s production, because when they put it together, like April 5th, for any Talk fans, it's amazing. I nearly swore there, but it's amazing. Yeah, I love them.
Burn my body set the light to set me free. Release the ash into the sea. Celebrate ceremony.
Your videos are also highly creative, highly visual.
Thanks.
And I read that you trawl car boots for boxes of Cine 8 film and shamelessly put them into.
I wish I was that much of a hipster, but that was actually a guy that we worked with who I found on Vimeo who did that.
Yeah.
Like he would find all this footage and he'd make things from.
But they really work well.
Yeah. Well, it's like
And obviously that kind of approach, visual approach, lends itself to your music so well.
It does
doesn't
fit well.
It fits. Even if it had been put together by accident, it fits and it works together. So you think, oh, this is really worked and planned, and the lyrics seem to work with some of the things people are doing on screen and things like that.
Oh, he did that to the music, and he spent a lot of. Well, I don't know how much time he spent, but he found from his archives of all these car boot cell, like Super 8 footage, things that related to the lyrics in the song, and I really like that in another way because it's like it makes me think of like someone's life flashing before their eyes, which thematically goes with the song as well. But also just the idea that these things that you record, I mean, we all do them, and now with mobile phones, you record snatches of your life, and then you kind of forget about them. But Sam Spreckley, who made it, dug all these things out and then put them all together. So it's kind of an exciting thing to think that someone's forgotten memory that they were literally throwing away, or when someone died, they got put in a box and got sold for 25p. Now has new life.
Live on.
Yeah, you're right. It lives on. People live on now, don't they?
Yeah.
Now, okay, different question. Why 7 years between the two albums?
That was pure logistics and circumstance. There, I got to a point where I couldn't. I recorded the first album and pretty much most of the second one we did on a 16-track digital recorder. So it's not analog, but it essentially worked in the same way. In that, I'm still using faders. I'm still having to do, and I've never really known what I was doing in terms of recording. None of us have. We just sit in a room and
that's fun, though,
set the
isn't it?
mic.
That's fun.
I think that's what makes the music sound the way it does, for better or for worse. And we outgrew that setup essentially. I hit 16 tracks. Now, I'm not a big fan of bouncing down because you lose a lot of control. So when we got our publishing deal, part of that setup meant that they gave us the money to go to someone else and put what I'd already done or what we'd already done onto a computer and then have more control.
I guess with your music, as you're going to say, if part of the songwriting process is layering and putting stuff, 16 tracks is actually it's quite limited what you can do.
Yeah, I mean the first album was like we were using like one track could be like 4 instruments because I was like in the production when I was recording it to the computer, I'd have to like dip a fader when it became something else, then put it back up when it was a piano or whatever. Some of the songs are just the original things that we did on the 16 track, but there are other ones like a song called Will Greet Death, which just wouldn't have been possible on that setup. So those 7 years were the initial recordings and then getting to a point, and so maybe like 4 of those songs, or maybe even all of them, but in various states of completion, then going to a publisher and trying to facilitate being able to add to it, expand to it. They weren't always right. We got to a point where the album was just finished, but it wasn't. I couldn't admit it to myself, but eventually I realised it just wasn't how it should have been. So then after that, and that was probably about 5 years in, and big bits of me losing my mind and confidence with it, going, I don't even know if this is good. And then eventually getting to a point where we found Nick and said, who is a guy called Nick Rayner, who produced a girl called Era, who's on Ninja Tune, or a Ninja Tune label called Big Dada. and heard one of her songs, and it was like, this is incredible, and asked her like, who produced this, and she told us. We got him to pull everything apart and put it back together again, and then finally when I got the first one back, it was like, yeah, we're on the home stretch now, this is finally right.
And it sort of validated everything you've been doing then.
Well, finally, like it definitely did get to a point. It was like, oh, thank God, I definitely, it was like, well, I didn't know, definitely for a bit there, I didn't even know if it's, and even then, actually,
listening in our car to it, like,
you live with the song so long, you don't know if they're good or
you
bad.
lose all objectivity, don't you?
And you're almost like wanting. It's almost like someone says they're good, you don't believe it. You almost need someone to go, they're rubbish, but. I mean, that didn't really happen, I guess, and it probably would have affected me greatly for someone to tell me that in a bad way. But it was more like when it was out and then reviews kept coming in and they were beyond our wildest dreams positive. It was like, got to a point where that didn't mean much anymore because it was like, I don't even believe this. Like, how can so many people have been so nice, So...
normally you take all the good Chris.
Yeah.
You love it.
Yeah.
And the one person who goes,
Exactly.
you dwell on that for years.
But that
you're going the other way around.
That definitely does happen as well.
How difficult is it to then replicate the things in a live setting?
Impossible, really.
Okay.
And
so do you have to pare down the arrangements then of studio recordings
so
down?
experimenting now, right? Like, we're happy to make sound.
Well, I think for the first time ever, we've got to a point where it is making sense and we're confident live. We've been through a lot of... I actually gave up gigging because first of all, I got too nervous and my hand would shake. I still get nervous, but you might see a bit of handshaking tonight, but at least I can get through to the end of the set. We found a way of reworking the songs that meant that almost what we were doing live was completely different from the album recordings, but it wasn't hitting somewhere in between where it was just not neither here nor there, and it wasn't quite good enough. Now they kind of live in a different space entirely, and in a place that is, at least for me, as enthralling, and maybe even more so than not for me to say that the album tracks are enthralling, but at least they excite me as much as the album ones do, and maybe even more so because we're 7 years older than we were when we'd done a lot of these songs, and which is crazy, really.
You've got grey hair now.
Yeah, I have grey hair as well.
You'll probably find the next album knock it out in 6 months.
I hope so. Like, that would be the dream, but it's going to be different now because instead of sitting at home multi-tracking, I think I have to start them with Nick potentially, and we have to record just with a person sat there rather than us, like 11 p.m. or midnight or 1 in the morning, probably stoned. Well, actually, no, cut that. Just in case
listening to the Rolling Stones.
Just in case your mum's watching, or just talk on repeat. But it will now be probably quite a different process. But I hope so. Actually, I can't wait to get started with the next proper thing. So yeah.
Well, thanks very much for your time, guys. That's wonderful.
No, thank you.
Really looking forward to hearing your stuff tonight, and I'm sure you're as good as the album and the live experience rolled into one. That's fantastic.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Realize that skin and bone simply seeds
That was a broadcast production for Glovebox Live.
finding their way home.